Welcome to Max Premieres. Netflix has a massive science fiction catalog where many films went completely under the radar for most people. Today, I'm bringing you the 25 most underrated on the platform titles that deserve far more attention than they received when they arrived. Going from worst to best based on my honest take, no sugarcoating. If you find that useful, it would help me a lot if you left a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for your support. Number 25, Ghost in the Shell. In a future where technology can fully merge with the human body, Major Mira Killian is a perfect weapon, a human mind inside a state-of-the-art synthetic combat body. She hunts dangerous criminals and terrorists with efficiency impossible for any conventional human, but begins experiencing glitches, memory fragments that shouldn't exist in someone whose past was completely erased and rewritten by her creator. While investigating a mysterious hacker targeting executives at the corporation that built her, she discovers that questions about her own identity are connected to something far darker than anyone around her wants to admit. The live-action adaptation of Mamoru Oshii's legendary anime received mixed reviews, but has far more going for it than the negative notices of its time suggested. Visually, it's impeccable at its best moments, and the central question about identity and humanity in artificial bodies remains as relevant as ever. For those who dismissed it in 2017, it deserves a second look with adjusted expectations. Number 24, Troll. Deep within the Norwegian mountains, a creature of colossal proportions awakens after centuries of silence and begins advancing toward the city, destroying everything in its path. A group of experts must uncover its mythological origins and find a way to stop it before the destruction becomes irreversible. This Norwegian Netflix production was the most watched non-English film on the platform for weeks after its release, and became one of the great hidden successes of 2022. What distinguishes Troll from generic kaiju is its deep rooting in Scandinavian mythology and folklore. The monster isn't a nuclear accident or scientific aberration, but a creature that has belonged to that landscape since time immemorial. Director Roar Uthaug, responsible for the Tomb Raider film with Alicia Vikander, knows how to handle scale without losing focus on the human characters. For lovers of monster cinema who want something different from the American formula, this is exactly that. Number 23, The Titan. Earth is becoming uninhabitable. In a future of depleted resources and uncontrolled overpopulation, the only possible solution appears to be the forced adaptation of human biology to survive on other planets. An elite soldier agrees to undergo a radical experiment designed to do exactly that, transform him into something capable of living on Titan, Saturn's moon. What begins as a patriotic mission of sacrifice for humanity quickly turns into a nightmare as the physical changes go far beyond what anyone anticipated, and the boundary between the human subject and the being emerging begins to dissolve irreversibly. The film has pacing issues in its middle section, but the premise of biological transformation as extreme sacrifice is genuinely disturbing when executed well. Sam Worthington and Taylor Schilling carry the dramatic weight in moments where the screenplay doesn't always support them. For viewers who tolerate slower and more philosophical science fiction, it has more substance than its Netflix reputation suggests. Number 22, What Happened to Monday? In a future world where families are limited to one child, 7 identical sisters live sharing a single external identity. Each one goes out into the world one day of the week using the same name, Karen Setman, and returns to share everything she saw and experienced. The system works until one Monday simply doesn't come back. The other 6 must risk everything to find her while avoiding a government that would hunt all of them down if it discovered they exist. Numi Rapace plays all 7 sisters in a technically impressive performance that deserves far more attention than it received. The shared identity premise and birth control dystopia generate genuine tension, and the film has the courage to fully commit to the brutal consequences of its own narrative logic. Director Tommy Wirkola handles the action well when the film calls for it, one of the best and most unjustly forgotten science fiction films in Netflix's catalog. Number 21, Atlas. In a future dominated by advanced artificial intelligence, a brilliant analyst who deeply distrusts technology is forced to ally with the very AI she despises to survive a combat mission that completely spirals out of control. Agent Atlas Shepard has spent years hunting Harlan, a military AI that turned against humanity, and when she finally tracks it to a remote planet, the mission becomes a desperate situation where the AI combat suit is her only real chance of getting out alive. The dynamic between Atlas and the combat system she's forced to connect with is the real heart of the film. Jennifer Lopez delivers one of her best performances in years, and the film has the courage to commit to its central premise, the drama of learning trust between human and machine under extreme pressure. It's more interesting than the reviews at its release suggested, and has exactly the kind of solid science fiction entertainment Netflix produces best when it isn't trying to be too grand. Number 20. Archive. A scientist works in complete isolation in a remote laboratory to create a truly human AI. It's not a corporate or military project, it's personal, deeply personal. As his creation approaches completion, the hidden internal conflicts and emotions that have been driving the project all along begin emerging in ways that threaten to destroy everything. The film builds its tension slowly and deliberately, in keeping with the tradition of the most cerebral science fiction of the 1970s. Theo James carries most of the film nearly solo and does so with a restraint the screenplay requires, which proves effective in the moments where the story finally reveals its hand. The third act changes everything you thought you knew about what you'd been watching, and that final reveal isn't a cheat, it's been constructed with precision within the story's own logic from the very beginning. Archive went completely under the radar for most Netflix subscribers, and that's exactly the kind of injustice this list exists to correct. Number 19. The Cloverfield Paradox. A group of scientists tests a device in orbit designed to solve Earth's energy crisis. Instead of succeeding, they trigger a series of terrible events that open a door to a dark and unpredictable alternate reality with its own versions of the same scientists and its own physical laws. What began as a salvation mission turns into a nightmare of alien body parts acting autonomously, walls with minds of their own, and physical phenomena defying all understanding. The film was surprise released directly on Netflix following the 2018 Super Bowl and received very harsh reviews at the time. But watched without the inflated expectations of being the definitive Cloverfield franchise revelation, it has far more genuinely disturbing moments than most people remember. The cast is excellent, the space horror atmosphere works well in its central section, and the ideas about parallel realities and unintended consequences have more depth than the reviews at its release acknowledged. Number 18. Colossal. Gloria, a woman struggling with alcoholism and her collapsed life, returns to her hometown and discovers something completely impossible. She is somehow connected to a giant monster appearing in Seoul exactly when she stands in a specific park at a specific time. Her movements in that park synchronize perfectly with the kaiju's movements on the other side of the world. Colossal uses that absurd science fiction premise to talk about something completely different and far darker: addiction, toxicity in relationships, and the damage that unbalanced people can cause to those around them without being conventional monsters. Anne Hathaway and Jason Sudeikis deliver two of their best performances in roles that completely subvert their usual public image. Nacho Vigalondo's film is exactly the kind of auteur science fiction with no obvious precedents that is therefore impossible to categorize or anticipate in any of its turns. A completely underrated gem. Number 17. The Space Between Us. He was born on Mars during humanity's first colonization mission. His mother was an astronaut who died giving birth to him. Gardner Elliott grew up in the Martian colony without knowing Earth, only through screens and digital connections, and when he finally travels to his species' home planet, he discovers that his body, adapted to Martian gravity, struggles with Earth in ways that threaten his life. But what he most wants to find on Earth is his biological father and the only friend he has ever had, a girl with whom he has maintained long-distance contact for years. The film blends the science fiction of bodily adaptation with teenage romance, and both elements work better than contemporary reviews suggested. Asa Butterfield has exactly the vulnerability the character needs, and the premise of an extraterrestrial visiting his home planet as a tourist has more emotional resonance than most people expect. For those who enjoy more sentimental and less spectacular science fiction, this is exactly that. Number 16. Rim of the World. Four misfit teenagers arrive at a summer camp that abruptly becomes a war zone when an alien invasion begins. Adults disappear or die, and the four kids discover they accidentally possess a key that could be crucial for stopping the invasion. Without a plan, without guidance, and completely out of their element, they must cross through the chaos of the invasion to deliver that key to whoever needs it. Rim of the World has the energy and aesthetic of 80s adventure films for young audiences, something between The Goonies and Super 8 with an alien invasion as the catalyst. Director McG, known for the Charlie's Angels films, applies a visual energy that keeps the pace even when the screenplay has its rough spots. The teenage cast is genuinely charismatic, and the relationships between the four protagonists have the right dynamic to make the story work. It's not a perfect film, but it has far more heart than the negative reviews at its Netflix premiere suggested. For fans of the science fiction adventure aimed at younger audiences. Number 15. Kin. Elijah, a troubled teenager, finds an alien weapon of extraordinary power in an abandoned warehouse. When his brother, freshly released from prison, inadvertently gets him into very serious trouble with dangerous criminals, Elijah ends up fleeing cross-country with him, the extraterrestrial weapon, as their only real protection. As they're pursued both by the criminals and mysterious figures of non-human origin who want the weapon back at any cost, the two brothers must rebuild a relationship that was never easy to begin with. Kin has far more to offer than its reputation, as a modest action film suggests. The emotional core of the relationship between the two brothers, one adopted, one biological, has an authenticity the film doesn't waste. Dennis Quaid in a serious supporting role. The revelation of the weapon's origin in the third act opens up a universe that deserved much more exploration. For those seeking science fiction with genuine human heart rather than spectacle. Number 14. Spaceman. An astronaut on a solitary mission toward the edges of the solar system has been completely isolated for months when he discovers something has followed him from Earth into deep space. A creature that lives in the cracks of time, knows everything about him, and has come to help him confront what he never had the courage to face before departing. Adam Sandler plays astronaut Yakub in what may be one of the most restrained and genuine performances of his decades-long career. The film, adapted from Yaroslav Kalfaz's Czech novel, is deliberately slow and dreamlike, built around conversations between Yakub and the creature about marriage, absence, guilt, and what it means to be so far from everything that matters. It's exactly the kind of philosophical science fiction that doesn't appeal to everyone, but for those who connect with it, it's an experience not easily forgotten. It deserved far more attention than it received at its Netflix premiere, and time is treating it well. Number 13. Paradise. In a future where Lifetime can be bought and sold like any other commodity, a man's wife loses decades of her life expectancy to repay a debt. Overnight, she goes from having decades ahead of her to standing at the threshold of old age. Her husband, desperate and determined, sets out on an impossible mission to recover those stolen years, which leads him to uncover a system built on the systematic exploitation of the most vulnerable to extend the lives of the wealthiest. This German Netflix production arrived without any marketing noise and went unnoticed by most subscribers, a considerable injustice. The life transfer premise has a very solid narrative and emotional logic, and the film has the courage to take it to its darkest conclusions without seeking easy exits. Marlene Tanjik delivers a very effective central performance for lovers of dystopian science fiction who aren't afraid of the moral implications of their own premises. Number 12. Skyline. Years after the events of the first Skyline films, humans and alien hybrids have achieved a fragile peace. When a virus threatens to shatter that coexistence by turning hybrids aggressive and uncontrollable, an expedition sets out on a mission to the aliens' home world to find a cure before war breaks out again. Rose, the protagonist, has unique abilities to interact with alien technology that make her indispensable to the mission, but also make her a target. The third film in the Skyline franchise is by far the best of the three, which isn't the highest standard in the world, but is relevant because it exceeds the expectations the franchise had established by a considerable margin. The action set on the alien world has a scale and visual originality that many higher budget productions failed to achieve. For fans of action science fiction who don't dismiss low-budget productions on principle, this one deserves more credit than it received at its release. Number 11. Anon. In a future society where every action is continuously recorded and monitored, crime is practically impossible because surveillance is total and omnipresent. When a detective stumbles upon a woman who cannot be tracked by any system who exists outside the surveillance network in ways that shouldn't be possible, he's drawn into a mystery that threatens the foundations of the control system, keeping society apparently free from violence. This Belgian production went completely unnoticed on Netflix, but has exactly the kind of premise the best dystopian science fiction requires: the anomaly within the perfect system as an agent of revelation. The identity and surveillance thriller has careful tension construction, and the dark and claustrophobic cinematography perfectly complements the material. It's more a mystery film than an action film, which differentiates it from most of its contemporaries on the platform. For those who enjoy science fiction that prioritizes ideas over special effects. Number 10. Outside the Wire. A drone pilot is sent into a dangerous war zone and assigned as a partner to an officer hiding a crucial secret. He's a prototype android whose existence is classified. Together, they must complete a mission to stop an imminent nuclear attack while navigating a trust relationship complicated by the fact that neither of them knows exactly what they can rely on from the other. Anthony Mackie, in one of his most physically demanding roles outside the Marvel Cinematic Universe, has exactly the right presence and energy for a combat android that is neither villain nor fully trustworthy ally. The film raises genuine questions about programmed loyalty versus emerging morality without resolving them simplistically. The action is solid and the pace doesn't drop. For an original Netflix action science fiction production, it has more substance than it's usually given credit for. It doesn't reinvent the genre, but executes its premise with solidity and honesty. Number 9. The Platform. In a vertical prison of endless levels, a food platform descends each day from the highest level to the lowest. Prisoners on level 1 have access to an abundant feast. By the time the platform reaches the lower levels, absolutely nothing remains. The system works perfectly as an allegory for capitalism and resource distribution, and Galder Gaztelu Urrutia's Spanish film isn't embarrassed for a single moment by its own symbolism. Goreng, the protagonist, arrives voluntarily at the prison with a book under his arm and exits completely transformed by what he experiences. The violence is explicit and necessary to the central argument, not decorative. The film was one of Netflix's great phenomena during the pandemic and achieved something few genre productions manage, being simultaneously entertaining and genuinely disturbing in a philosophical sense. For those who missed it during that period and are looking for science fiction that has something to say about the real world. Number 8. Code 8, Part 2. In a world where people with special abilities are systematically discriminated against and kept at the social margins by a militarized police system, a young girl seeks justice after her brother is killed by corrupt officers. With the help of an ex-convict trying to live honestly and his partner, she confronts powerful enemies in a system designed to protect the guilty rather than the victims. The second Code 8 film improves significantly on the first by focusing more on the characters and the social consequences of the conflict than on spectacular action. The Amell cousins, Steven and Robbie, have a natural dynamic that gives credibility to the central relationship. The premise of marginalized superhumans as a metaphor for social inequality and police abuse is more developed here than in the previous installment. For those who enjoy social science fiction with solid action and a clear political perspective, that is neither preachy nor simplistic. Number 7. Extinction. Peter suffers recurring nightmares about losing his family in violent and apocalyptic ways. His wife pushes him to seek psychiatric help because the nightmares are destroying his daily life. Then the alien invasion he has been seeing in his dreams begins happening in reality, and Peter discovers that something in those visions isn't simply irrational fear. It's something more specific and more unsettling than anyone in his life could have anticipated. The film has a third-act twist that completely changes the interpretation of everything you've watched before, and if you don't know it, it works in a genuinely surprising way. Without revealing anything, Extinction completely reframes its initial premise in a manner that has moral and philosophical implications the film isn't afraid to explore. Michael Peña carries the film solidly. For those who enjoy thriller science fiction that saves its best ideas for the end, this is exactly that. it's worth far more than its Netflix reputation suggests. Number 6. The Midnight Sky. In a post-global catastrophe world covered in deadly radiation, a sick elderly scientist is the only human remaining at an Arctic research station. When he detects a spacecraft returning to Earth without knowing what awaits them, he embarks on an impossible journey across the frozen Arctic to warn them not to land. George Clooney directs and stars in this adaptation of Lily Brooks Dalton's novel with a solemnity and visual beauty that fully justify the production. The film is slow and deliberate in ways that Netflix's average audience tends not to tolerate well, which partly explains its divided reception at its premiere. But watched, without rushing and with the right expectations, it has an emotional depth about regret, loneliness, and sacrifice that few science fiction productions of that period achieved. The scenes aboard the ship have their own independent narrative quality, one of the most unjustly forgotten films in Netflix's science fiction catalog. Number 5. The Great Flood. A massive flood devastates the planet. The waters rise without pause, and destruction is total in every direction. Amid the chaos, a desperate struggle unfolds to rescue a child trapped in a building while the waters surround it, and time runs out with no guarantee that anyone can arrive in time. The Belgian production uses the climate disaster as a frame for a very intimate survival story, where individual decisions under extreme pressure carry the weight of the entire narrative. It's not a conventional disaster film with an action hero and massive visual effects. It's something smaller, and therefore more emotionally effective at its best moments. The underwater and flood cinematography is technically impressive for its budget. For those seeking disaster cinema that places the emphasis on individual human experience rather than the scale of the event, this is exactly the right alternative to genre blockbusters. It deserved far more attention. Number 4. Captain Nova. A pilot travels back in time from a future of total environmental disaster to prevent the catastrophe from occurring. The journey works, but with an unanticipated complication. Upon arriving in the past, she is transformed into her childhood self, with an adult mind trapped in a girl's body. To prevent the environmental disaster from within the past, she must convince adults of what's coming without anyone taking her seriously as a source of information. This Dutch Netflix production has the lightness and humor of the best children's science fiction without sacrificing the real urgency of its central theme, the climate crisis and intergenerational responsibility. It's a film primarily designed for young audiences, but has enough intelligence to avoid being condescending to them or boring for the adults watching alongside them. The protagonist's performance as an adult in a child's body has exactly the right duality, a small gem in Netflix's international catalog that deserves to be discovered. Number 3. Army of the Dead. Las Vegas is under quarantine following a zombie outbreak that turned it into a war zone infested with the undead. A group of mercenaries enters the city on a heist mission. $200 million in a vault beneath Las Vegas's largest casino before the government wipes the city with a nuclear bomb. Zack Snyder returns to the zombie genre that launched him with Dawn of the Dead in 2004 and reinvents it with entirely his own energy and visual ambition. The most interesting twist is the zombie hierarchy. Alphas are creatures with intelligence, strategy, and even their own emotions, which turns the enemy into something radically more threatening and morally complex than the standard horde. The film runs nearly 2.5 hours and never loses its pace. The cast, led by Dave Bautista, in his best role outside the Marvel Cinematic Universe, has the right chemistry to make the ensemble work, for genre cinema lovers who enjoy unabashed ambition. Number 2. Office Invasion. 3 friends working at a low-profile mining company in South Africa suddenly find themselves in the middle of an attack by hostile aliens who have arrived to seize the planet's resources. Without military training, without special powers, and with very little common sense available at the moment of crisis, they must defend their workplace against a threat none of the 3 are remotely equipped to face. This South African science fiction comedy was one of the most unexpected revelations in the Netflix catalog, and has exactly the kind of irreverent and self-deprecating energy that distinguishes the best genre comedies when they don't try to be more than they are. The humor is specifically African without being exclusionary for international audiences. The chemistry among the three protagonists is genuinely funny, and the film has the intelligence never to take itself too seriously at any point. For those seeking light science fiction with its own personality and no pretensions of importance, exactly what the list needed at number 2. Number 1. The Island. Lincoln 6 Echo lives in a controlled facility alongside hundreds of survivors of an environmental catastrophe. Everyone awaits the lottery the moment they'll be selected to go to the island, the only paradise remaining free from contamination on Earth. When Lincoln starts asking questions he shouldn't ask and seeing things he shouldn't see, he discovers that everything he's been told about his life, his origins, and his purpose has been a perfectly constructed lie designed to keep him under control. Michael Bay directed this film in 2005, and it is, without any possible exaggeration, the best science fiction of his entire career. Ewan McGregor and Scarlett Johansson, at the peak of their respective charisma, carry a story about identity, free will, and corporate exploitation that has more philosophical substance than the film's marketing ever suggested at the time. It failed at the box office, but time has treated it extraordinarily well. On Netflix, it's precisely the film most people should have already seen and haven't, the best on this list. And that's the list. 25 science fiction films on Netflix that deserve more attention than they got. If you like this video, don't forget to leave your like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss our upcoming videos. See you soon. Thanks for watching.